You're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and welcome to yet another Devilman-related video. Today I thought I'd talk about how I got into Devilman in the first place, and in addition to that, mention where I think that newcomers to the series should start out. So the way I got into Devilman is a little bit unconventional. It all started about 5 years ago when I was watching this YouTube video called The Top 10 Most Controversial Anime Series, or something of that nature. Well, it was at this time I was getting into really gory and kind of fucked up anime, so that's why I was watching that video in the first place. Well, at the top of that list, there was an anime I had never heard of. That anime was one by the name of Violence Jack. Now, the guy said that Violence Jack was only 3 episodes long, and he said it was one of the most fucked up animes ever made. So, of course I had to see it. Not only that, but I actually saw a couple other videos of the same sort of subject, and all of them had Violence Jack at number 1. It was considered the most gory to some, considered the most controversial, the most fucked up. These were different lists by different people. I can't remember every single one I watched, you'll have to forgive me on that. But it was just me kind of looking for recommendations. And of course with Violence Jack, that was the one that I was most interested in. So I watched Violence Jack, and I fucking loved it. But the thing is it is pretty fucked up. I'd say I've definitely seen worse in years after that. And obviously that's all subjective. Episode 2 is probably the most fucked up out of all 3 episodes. Violence Jack itself was the story of this big guy named Violence Jack who lives in this apocalyptic wasteland and fights evil. It has a very similar premise to Fist of the North Star, but it actually came out before Fist of the North Star did. Not only that, not to mention it also came out before the original Mad Max, because Mad Max came out in 1980, whereas Violence Jack was written in 1973 to 1974, and then getting serialized throughout the 80s, 90s, etc. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Violence Jack, you may be confused as to what this has to do with Devilman. If you're not unfamiliar with it, then you know why I'm going on about it. But anyway, after watching it, I read through the manga. I loved every second of the manga. However, I only read as far as the manga reader I was using at the time could go. And at the time, it could only go up to the El Dorado arc. I have since read 2 more arcs after that, but whichever fan is translating it has not translated anything in a good minute. So right now, it only goes up to Evil Town. Anyway, after reading through the Violence Jack manga as far as I could, I wanted more. So I looked on Wikipedia to see if there was any more information on it. Scrolling through the Wikipedia page, I read that Violence Jack was a sequel to something called Devilman. At that point, I went online, and luckily enough, the 1972 Devilman series had just been released in the US. This was around a year after I had first gotten into Violence Jack. So, I ordered it, and then I watched it. Well, I started watching it. If you've been keeping up with my videos, you know I actually only just finished the 72 Devilman about a week or 2 ago. And the main reason for that is I was watching it together with Snowman, so I didn't actually finish it until just recently, even though I started watching it 4 years ago. To pass the time between not watching the actual 70s series, I read the manga. After I read the manga, I read some of the spin-off mangas, the sequel mangas. I watched the OVAs. I watched Crybaby. I watched Devilman Lady. I watched Chibi Chara Go Nagai World. I watched all of the adaptations except for that one, because that way I could still get my Devilman fix. And the more and more I watched it, the more and more I loved it. So since then, I've been getting more and more into Devilman and constantly exploring different aspects of the Devilman extended universe. Right now, I've been on kind of a Violence Jack binge again, which you may have noticed with the trend in my videos lately. But anyway, that's how I got into Devilman. So, where to start if you're new? Well, I've got a few answers for that. First off, if I were to recommend just one answer to everyone, read the manga. Read the original manga. That is where you should start. And luckily enough, it's officially been released in English. At least the first half of it is. The second half will be next month, so both of them will be out in the US fairly shortly. If you're the kind of guy that doesn't like to read manga, I understand. I think it's a weird thing to have, but hey, I understand not wanting to read. So if you're that kind of person, I recommend doing it this way. Watch the first 2 OVAs, Devilman the Birth and Devilman the Demon Bird. Watch those first 2 OVAs. Once you finish those, watch through Devilman Crybaby. Then after that, you could watch Ammon Apocalypse of Devilman, but I don't recommend watching that until after you've seen Crybaby. Because although it is technically the 3rd episode of the OVA series, it skips a whole lot and has some major spoilers, and it's very confusing if you don't know the whole story. And if you're the type to not read the manga, you at least need to get the whole story from Crybaby. So like I said, start with the 2 OVAs because those are much more faithful to the manga. And they do a much better job with the build-up than Crybaby does. Then watch Crybaby so you get the whole original story, and then move on from there. It also does depend on what you're trying to get out of it. If you want a more goofy, wacky, over-the-top, cartoony Devilman, watch the 70s series. If you're looking for the original story, read the manga. The only thing is, I don't really recommend starting with Crybaby, although a lot of people have, because the thing about Crybaby is the pacing is a little off, and it leaves out a lot, so there's not really a lot of build-up in Crybaby. So even though I think Crybaby is fantastic, it's really something I recommend watching at least after seeing the first 2 OVAs. Anyway, that's how I got into Devilman and how I think people should start out with the series. Let me know in the comments below how you got into the series, if you're into the series, where you think people should start, and if you liked this video. Do let me know in the comments below, and have a great rest of the day.
Subscribe to Fiji to Red Eye.